Thank you all for joining us here on the NFL Team Breakdowns edition of Spreaker.com. Welcome into the National Sports Studios alongside Robert Dieters and the entire broadcast crew. I'm Nick Rice, and basically similar to the sluggish start we've had here to this, the Falcons started with a very, very sluggish offense. They finished the season 4-12, had a real slow start and basically couldn't get out of their own end. The offense was far from superior, and that defense wasn't a whole lot better. There were a number of problems involved with Atlanta. This may be one of the more intriguing offseason analysis that we do here for NFL Team Breakdowns, considering that Atlanta could go so many other directions. They were expected to win the NFC Championship game this last season. They were far from those expectations. They selected 6th overall in the draft. Many expected them to pick number 32 in the draft based off of how they would finish. We bring over the National Sports Commissioner, Robert Dieters. And Robert, your thoughts on a 4-12 season there for Atlanta?
I think Atlanta's struggle was secondary position and the safeties. And it's really for the Falcons before this season, but lost Julio throughout the season. Matt Ryan had a fantastic season in the 2013 campaign. But the defense couldn't get the job done. That's the biggest concern right now for the Atlanta Falcons. Did they make the right moves to make this defense better? And can they do better in the 2014 campaign? I think so. I think they're going to get a couple more wins. But, you still have the Panthers, and you're still going to have the Saints, I think, at the top of the division.
Yeah, the NFC South for the last decade has always had a different team every year hoist the, I guess you could say, the divisional crown. And there in the NFC South, it's been the case ever since the 2002 Buccaneers Super Bowl run where they led the division. And it's just been flipping back and forth ever since. It's a very intriguing scenario, and there may be a different person on top again as Carolina led it, but I believe that New Orleans could have a chance to take over the division this coming year. They really have a shot to do that. And, teams like the Falcons will really be relatively easy, I believe, outs there for New Orleans unless Atlanta had something to do with that through the transaction period. We won't take any longer before we go ahead and take a look at some of the transactions. Robert, you looked over this and tried to figure out how exactly they filled the holes and the weaknesses on this team. Your thoughts on just how far they went towards improving the ball club?
I think when you look at it, the defense is probably the biggest concern. That's where they got their biggest needs. You got DN Tyson Jackson from the Kansas City Chiefs. He signed a 5-year, $25 million contract. I think they're getting some big contracts out there, and it's really interesting to watch. But when you look at it, they also improved on the cornerback position. They have a Javier Arenas, cornerback Josh Wilson, and a safety Dwight Lowry because they had to get rid of Thomas DeCloud, and he got released but signed a 2-year deal with the Carolina Panthers, so he's going to be staying within the division. That'll be interesting to watch when the Falcons play the Panthers. But Nick, I think they made some right moves. I think one move that a lot of people are going to be shocked about is kind of a wide receiver, Devin Hester. You already have three top wide receivers on that roster. Why do you need another one? Well, the depth. I think Devin Hester is going to really bring depth to the Atlanta Falcons. And also when you look at it, DN Tyson Jackson is going to help you out a lot. One player that you're going to lose during this offseason, Tony Gonzalez, he retired. He was a big threat and really helped out when Julio Jones was gone, but also Harry Douglas as well and Rodney White. All those three stepped up without a Julio Jones. But Nick, I think they did pretty well in the free agency period. I think I'm going to give them a B on it.
They actually, according to, I believe I heard this from a source among NFL Network, but they signed a grand total of something like 18 different, through the draft and free agency, 18 different offensive and defensive linemen, which, I believe it's tops in the league, but it's something that was a huge concern for Atlanta after this 4-12 campaign. As, you can look at the running backs' woes and, most of the time they weren't even on the field. You can take a look at a number of other factors, especially in that secondary, Robert, as you mentioned. But I believe the offensive and defensive lines were the huge issue. Can we expect a much improved line just based off of the free agent additions coming into 2014?
Well, I think the D-line was a big issue, but it's not a huge one. I think it was more of the O-line, and that's why you got Jake Matthews. I mean, this guy brings strength in his profile. He's big, strong, athletic. He's a natural bender, exceptional. He's an exceptional technician, explosive 6-inch punch. He's quick, has active hands and outstanding base balance, body control, and hand placement. And I think some weaknesses you're really going to watch out for is his arm length appears too short. Limited reach and extension. I don't think that. I mean, I guess when your arms are too short, it could be a little bit of concern. But to be honest, I think he's really just going to help out Matt Ryan. And that running game was awful a year ago. And they got Devontae Freeman, who's supposed to be an underrated draft pick, and I hope he is. I hope this running back position. I think they're gonna go from worst to maybe in the middle of the league. And if they're in the middle of the league and their wide receiver core is in top 10, this team is looking pretty good. And I know the defense isn't gonna win them. I don't think they're gonna be Super Bowl contenders just yet, but I think if this team keeps on moving in the right direction they are right now, I think they're going to be solid in 2 years, and I think they're going to retake over that division. I think maybe not in 2014, but 2015, I think these are division winners.
Oh, yeah, obviously this isn't a one-year project. This isn't a Super Bowl team right now. Doesn't matter what any Atlanta fan will tell you, but when you take a look at just some of these statistics, the Falcons we're talking Steven Jackson only had something around the neighborhood of 500 yards for the year, far below expectations. The Falcons ranked towards the bottom of the league in rushing yards per attempt at 3.9 on the season. They only had 11 rushing TDs, and Matt Ryan threw 17 interceptions to only 26 TDs, which is far below what their opponents were putting up against them, which, obviously was not something they expected going into the year. So I think a lot of it had to go on that offensive line. I think the big issue was the fact that they just could not stop defenses that really were up, like upper echelon. But when you look at the Falcons right now, they went 4-12, obviously, but they ranked last in rushing with only 77 yards per game, and on the defensive side against the run, they ranked 31st. So it looks like they corrected those issues, and I'm telling you, just as you mentioned, if they only improve from 32nd, which is last in the league, to something like in the neighborhood of 20th or 15th, this is already a team that, everything else is the same. You already win about 3 or 4 more football games. You got to believe this is a team that actually is on the upswing after such a disappointing campaign. And one final mention, you talked about Devin Hester, the former Chicago Bear. He is potentially the under-the-radar free agency acquisition in that division. When you talk about Devin Hester being not only a receiver that could play in the number 4 position, but he could right away add to what was one of the worst special teams units in the National Football League. This special teams was a disaster. Your best player was a Matt Bosher, the punter, but now you add a return specialist, Hester, who is only one return away in the kickoff department from setting a new NFL record. I cannot wait to see him crash that record this coming season, as the special teams unit for the Falcons is finally become a formidable unit.
And not a lot of people like to talk about Devin Hester as in the special teams unit, but I think when you look at it, his film really proves it all. He really has the speed and really can make some moves and push for some more yards and really help out your offense. But Nick, I know you touched on Matt Ryan, and Matt Ryan, 17 interceptions. He got sacked 44 times. Mm-hmm. He was really under pressure most of the time, but still he got passes off. And even without Julio Jones, Nick, this team still did pretty well. And you have a Harry Douglas, Tony Gonzalez, and Rodney White. That was the three weapons this year that Matt Ryan had. All work together. Now they do get rid of Tony Gonzalez. You have 3 targets again this year. You shouldn't be disappointed because you have 3 solid wide receivers. Harry Douglas went for over 1,000 yards in receiving and had 2 touchdowns. But Tony Gonzalez was your red zone type of player. He had 18 TDs. But Rodney White was a guy that could really. I think he was more of a speedster type of guy. But Harry Douglas, his longest run after was pretty much the longest catch he made was 80 yards. So let's see what happens. Though. I mean, I think the squad's pretty strong on the offensive side. Because they did draft Jake Matthews, you got Devin Hester, and Devontae Freeman from the draft is an under the radar type of player. I think he's going to make an impact behind Steven Jackson. And if Steven Jackson's hurt, I think Freeman is really going to step it up and maybe take that starting role.
Yeah, one thing that does scare me, though, is not having Tony Gonzalez at tight end. And I believe the only free agency hole and also draft hole that the Falcons had at the tight end position, it was the only place they didn't address. I love the additions of a Pat Soliai, the defensive tackle, Tyson Jackson, defensive end, Jonathan Babineau, a defensive tackle too. At least 2 of those 3 guys you could expect to start, along with Pariah Jerry there at the D tackle position as well. But when you look at that tight end position, listen, I know it's not going to be the same with a Tony Gonzalez, one of the best of all time. But when you look at the depth chart right now, Robert, your starter right now is Levine Toilolo and Mikey Schuler. Listen, we're not expecting the world out of these guys, but is this just a little bit of a cause for concern for Atlanta?
It can be, and it can also be a work in progress. This team is not a Super Bowl team just yet, Nick. I think if you see, let's give this team at least a year.
It takes place in ancient
we're sorry for that commercial. But getting back to my point, I think the tight end position, it's going to be rough, and I'm not going to give them a solid grade, Nick. But I think it's a work in progress. Tony Gonzalez was your franchise player, your tight end franchise. Now you got Jake Matthews, who's going to be your franchise left tackle position. Matt Ryan, already your star at the quarterback position, but losing Tony Gonzalez, it's not going to be the same for the Falcons for a couple of years. I think after the 2014 campaign, I think in the draft, I think they're going to be addressing a tight end position. But Nick, I don't expect much of the offensive side. They already have 3 solid wide receivers. All Matt Ryan has to do is just throw to them. All he's got to do in this offense and the defense, I think, is just going to keep on improving.
Yeah, when you take a look at that offensive unit, the offensive line definitely has to step up for the loss of Tony Gonzalez into retirement. But, you touched on Jake Matthews, so I guess that's it's a real important portion of the show, something that I believe is a good time to get into. The NFL draft over the opening week of May. Jake Matthews, the offensive tackle, taken 6th overall out of Texas A&M. They take a defensive lineman, Rashid Hageman, who should start, the former Minnesota product. And then later on in the draft, they take yet another defensive lineman and Tyler Starr. So when you look at the draft as a whole, Robert, what did you take away from exactly how this team improved in the month of May?
Well, Nick, I did touch up on Jake Matthews and Devontae Freeman in this draft. I really like the offense. I think Freeman's going to come in and really help out Steven Jackson and Jaquiz Rogers. Rogers, I think, didn't perform very well this season. I think he performed under his talent. And Jaquiz Rogers really needs to step up next season if this offense really wants to improve. Hageman, though, on the other side, I think the second-round pick, I think it was a good pickup for this team. I think he's a physical type of guy. He'll get to the quarterback, and not a lot of people are expecting a lot out of him. But I think you're gonna watch out for Hageman, and his 2013 NCAA football stats. He had 34 tackles, 2 sacks. He can get to the quarterback. I think something that everyone's gonna be looking out for. And I think the Falcons are going to be more of a pass rush type of squad. And a lot of people aren't going to – I think a lot of people are going to keep this defense under the radar. They are going to be, but I think the cornerback and safety position – and I think the D-line was addressed. But I think the linebacking core is going to be hurting for a while.
Yeah, one of the best, one of my favorite parts of the show is to analyze the draft a little more in depth. Al Kiper gave this Falcons draft grade about a B-, and overall they've received about a B. And the reason why I think so is I'm basically going to predict what these players are going to end up becoming in the National Football League. It'd be fun to go back in a couple years and listen to the tape. But for the Falcons' first-round pick, Jake Matthews, he's a guy that's going to play for 15 years. He's similar to Russell Okung. Rashid Hageman, the defensive lineman out of Minnesota, I think he's going to be a solid, not great starter, but he's still going to have his say in the league for years to come. He's going to be similar to, if anyone's heard of a Cam Thomas defensive tackle. He's just kind of average. He's a plug-and-play kind of a rotational defensive tackle. Desmond Southward and the fifth-round pick are both Ricardo Allen and Marquise Spurl. I haven't heard a whole lot of great stuff on them. They may be out of the league in a few years. But also Prince Shembo, very, very likely that this guy may not be all that good for years to come. But the only other player that I actually think is relatively good is the Devonta Freeman pickup that, Robert, you touched on a little bit earlier. A guy that I think could come into the rotation in the next few years after a Steven Jackson moves on. And with the Jaquiz Rodgers facing a contract year coming up, look for Devonta Freeman to step into that role. So Freeman and their first and second round picks, I think, are guys that can start for the Falcons in years to come.
And let's look at Desmond Southward. This is a guy who's big and fast, really good natural agility, and I think he has movement for just being a bigger safety. I know we have a Dwight Lowry over there, but I think Desmond Southward is going to learn from Dwight Lowry and really help out the Falcons. I think this draft class does deserve a B-. I mean, their picks weren't great, but I think the offensive picks were the best. But I think Desmond Southward is going to really be in. I think he's really just going to kind of be. He's going to be the backup, but I think he can really help out this type of defense where they're going right now. And Nick, I think Devonta Freeman, I think, is a guy everyone's going to be looking forward to. And it's just going to be all interesting how this draft class does. I don't think this was a great draft class. I think this is one of the worst draft classes that we've had on this show so far.
Wow, that is some serious knocks on the Atlanta Falcons.
I'm just thinking out of all the draft classes we've analyzed, I think this is one of the worst. They have some ups. Jake freaking Matthews is going to be doing something this season. He's going to be around this league for a while. You just hope he doesn't get hurt. If he gets hurt, that first round pick is screwed. But I don't think Jake Matthews will get hurt. I think he's really going to help out Matt Ryan. And Devonta Freeman, I think he's going to be a guy that you're really going to look out for. And Eggman also. So, I mean, I'm not trying to bash on him, but this isn't going to be one of the most impressive draft classes we see.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked at Mike Mayock's predictions on the third-round pick, Desmond Southward. I think the first two, we can both agree, will be future starters in the league, if not for Matthews' day one starter. But Desmond Southward, I mean, Mayock mentions that he looked good at the combine, but that was about it. He can play anything, but only play it okay. So, I mean, that doesn't sound like a guy that's going to really start. I think he's just a backup player. But, yeah, I mean, this wasn't a draft class that's going to wow you, but when you have two starters that you can get out of the class, I think you came away relatively happy. And also, when you add the free agency department, we'll take a look at the overall depth chart, graded position by position, ladies and gentlemen, in a matter of minutes. Just lasting thoughts here. That draft, not only this year, but last year, a little subpar when you talk about Atlanta's expectations year in and year out. But I think that the Falcons will be relatively happy with the Matthews and Rashid Hageman, who actually, Robert, was expected to be taken in the first round. So, I mean, you got to be happy that the defensive lineman fell to them at 37.
And this D-line has kind of struggled, so I hope he can really make a big impact. But, about Desmond Southward, he's a third-round pick. But, some of his flaws are short arms, and that's what they talked about with Jake Matthews. He has average flexibility and range. He's still developing on his positional instincts and diagnostic skills. His man coverage has limitations. I think that's one big concern because man coverage is huge in the NFL now, especially when you're going against Calvin Johnson or you're going against you're going against Michael Crabtree, you're going against Larry Fitzgerald. You're going against number one wide receivers, and you need some good man coverage. You're going to cover these guys. Maybe against even Julio Jones. Yeah, that's some corners. It's going to be tough. And the Saints, that's a tough team to cover because you gotta read Drew Brees. But I think Desmond Southward, he's kind of the guy that's gonna be kind of developing over time. And third to seventh, it's not great, but still, I think the first two picks were on the money.
The draft, I think, was a solid grade. We'll go ahead and take a look at every draft in the coming shows. NFL team breakdowns rolls on. Thank you all for joining us here on National Sports. Robert Dieter's joining us as well. We're going to go ahead and take a look at that depth chart just to put into fruition everything that we've stated over the last 20 minutes. But listen, guys, this is a depth chart that is much improved from last year when you add the free agents and the draftees. But is this a team that is worthy of a playoff spot? Well, let's take a first look at the quarterback position. And listen, Robert, A- is what comes to mind. When you throw in a TJ Yates as well from Houston, I think it's a solid pickup as well.
Oh, well, Matt Ryan over 4,000 yards passing. 17 interceptions. Yeah, it's bad, and he got sacked 44 times, so that's kind of the stat there that tells you that the O-line didn't help him as much, and he really had to do a lot of the work. I give this guy an A-. I like Matt Ryan. He's a good quarterback. He has weapons around him and uses them very well.
Yeah, and also, not to mention the worst running attack in the NFL statistically, 32nd and only 77 yards a game. It's hard to complete exactly. When you take a look, this may be the best season Matt Ryan has ever had. And, the statistics just, prove that he really had no surrounding talent. Guys were getting hurt left and right. No Julio Jones, no Steven Jackson. That offensive line was bad. I assume you stay an A- for the quarterback, which means at the running back position, it's not going to get nearly as high as a grade. Steven Jackson, we expect him to be healthy for a much more longer period of time, and Jacquizz Rodgers provides a 1-2 punch that I think overall is about a B-. Remember, Steven Jackson was the all-time leader in Rams rushing for the franchise. So this isn't a guy that has no clue how to run the football. Sure, he had an off year with the Falcons, but I think he can come back with a vengeance and have a real strong 2014 campaign.
You know what, Nick? I agree with you. I like Steven Jackson. He was good for the Rams. He competed in a tough NFC West. Still got the most rushing yards for his franchise. Give that man credit. He wasn't healthy, and that's what hurt them the most. That's why the running game was so poor. Steven Jackson was not there. Jacquizz Rodgers had to do a lot of the work, but he didn't really have anyone else. So he had his Sneeling behind him, and he's gone. But I think, am I saying Devontae Freeman, right? I am saying that right.
Yeah.
Sure, I think I've been saying Devontae, right? Yeah, I'm saying it right. Devontae Freeman, this was a good pickup for behind Steven Jackson, but, I think him and Jacquizz Rodgers are going to be competing for the backup spot for the running back position. I think something interesting to watch for in training camp. Devontae Freeman is a guy that is, he's quick, he's from Florida State, and I'm really gonna like how this guy moves, and really he's gonna make an impact on that depth chart, and really gonna have some good competition over Jacquizz Rodgers.
What's the grade?
So, my grade, yeah. I think I'll give it a C+, and I think so. C+. If Steve Jackson isn't healthy, I'll give him a C+. I think it's a B. If Steven Jackson stays healthy, I'll see them more.
Man, a lot of ifs. We're gonna go ahead and give you.
What I'm trying to say is, you have to have Steven Jackson healthy. Period. If your running back core wants to be good, it has to be with Steven Jackson. Now, I guess I'll give him a B- too. But, Devontae Freeman is going to be learning from Jacquizz Rodgers and Steven Jackson over time. And rookies, I think, come out of nowhere. I think, the Niners getting a Carlos Hyde. He's going to develop, and he's going to be competing for a spot over Frank Gore this season. This could be Frank Gore's last season as a starter, so it'll be fun to watch. Devontae Freeman or Jacquizz Rodgers might be taking Steven Jackson's spot in 2 years. So watch out.
Also, watch out for, as we'll also take a look at the fullback real quick. Actually, before we get going then, Patrick DeMarco and Maurice Higgins are penciled in as the 1 and 2 at the fullback position. C+ for that side of the ball.
I'm going to C+ too. I'm not really big on the fullback position, but it didn't really help out the running game at all because the running game it was the worst in the league.
And also, I guess names to look out for. You mentioned in the next couple of years, maybe some halfbacks taken to the fold. How about the leading receiver for the Falcons last year? Not Tony Gonzalez or Roddy White. Julio Jones wasn't in the mix. How about Harry Douglas, 85 catches, 1,067 yards with a long of 80 and 2 scores. Obviously, the touchdown target was Tony Gonzalez, but Douglas had all of the between the 20s type of gains and was really a viable portion over the middle of the field for that Falcons offense. And, listen, you may not like what you're getting behind your top 3, but when you take a look at Douglas, Julio Jones, and Roddy White as your wide receivers, I can't give this grade any less than an A-. Listen, this is a team that is going to be putting up points in bunches. You mentioned that Falcons offense took a step backwards, but that step backwards still put them at 14th in total offense, which isn't half bad. That's over half the teams in the league that they've beaten statistically in the league.
Nick, I think this is the first time I'm ever going to give this grade on this show, and you gave it last time. An A+ for that wide receiver core. You know why? Those are 3 big targets for Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan knows how to throw the football. He can make these wide receivers look so good. Julio Jones is going to come back. I think he's going to have a comeback type of season. Rodney White's going to be right behind him. Harry Douglas. I think 2 of these players get over 1,000 yards receiving.
That's extremely interesting coming from basically a receiving core that outside of the top 3, the next guys are obviously Devin Hester's good. Drew Davis, I think, isn't half bad. Darius Johnson's another penciled-in starter, and then after that, it's 4 rookies, including a couple undrafted free agents. When you take a look at the tight end position, Patrick DeMarco, who I'm looking statistically, I believe didn't have a single catch last season. Actually, he did. He had 8 receptions for 49 yards a season ago. He's going to have to step up and be the number 1 target. Him and actually a guy, I didn't mention this earlier, who actually is going to be pretty good, Bear Pasco, a big tight end. He's penciled in as the number 3 target according to OurLads.com, but I think he can come in and be a solid number 2 tight end. Despite what you're seeing here, I think this is a tight end position that deserves about a C+.
I think I'm giving him a C. This is going to be an average tight end type of team. Bear Pascal, I think out of New York is a good pickup for this squad. And Nick, it's not going to be the same without Tony Gonzalez. It's sad to see Tony Gonzalez go. I thought he would stick around for another year, but it is what it is. And Tony Gonzalez had a great career with the Falcons, and I think if Tony Gonzalez stayed, 4 great targets right there, but it's going to be a C for me.
It looks like they're going to go a lot of 4 and 5 wide sets to counter their lack of tight end production. The starters at the offensive line, Sam Baker, one of the better unheralded left tackles in the game, can still get it done. Justin Blalock, he's going to be starting at left guard. Joe Hawley at center. John Asamoah, I guess from Kansas City, he's going to be the right guard, and then obviously Jake Matthews penciled in as the right tackle right now. And also take a look at Ryan Schrader. He's the backup at tackle and can play both positions. It'll be interesting to see what the offensive line brings to the table, but I think a B is a solid grade for them, which is far better than the production they had last year.
I'm going to agree with you on that. I think they're going to be an average type of O-line. I think Jake Matthews just boosted up that grade. To be honest with you, I mean, this was like a C plus type of O-line. You bring it up to a B, I think they're really going to help out. Matt Ryan had over 4,000 yards passing, but got sacked 44 times. They struggled, but Jake Matthews better bring up that squad a little bit. John Asamoah, from Kansas City, helped out Alex Smith a little bit and helped out Jamal Charles. So let's see what happens. And I hope, I hope this team could really make a run for that division title this year, but I know it's not going to happen, but maybe make it interesting with your record. See what happens. I think this offense, mostly the quarterback and the wide receiver position, pretty much.
Make sure to check out the overall grades on Facebook, NFL team breakdowns page on Facebook.com, along with National Sports Broadcasters, which is an open group on Facebook. Make sure to tune in all the power rankings, as the offense deserves a B+ overall talent-wise for the Atlanta Falcons, which compares to really good offenses in the league. I mean, we gave San Diego about a B+. I think we gave the really good offense, the Green Bay Packers, about a B+ as well. Yes, we did. So that's not half bad to be put in that category. The defensive line, I think, deserves about a similar ranking. Jonathan Babineau, Paul Soliai, Tyson Jackson, and Croy Bierman are the penciled-in starters for that defensive front. Also throw in Rashid Hageman. And listen, I think a B+ is in the coming for the Falcons at the defensive line spot.
Well, they did all, as I said, I like the free agency period. They really made the right moves. Jonathan Babineau, probably the big guy you're looking for. He can tackle the running back, and he can also get to the quarterback. I think this, and I like a Tyson Jackson. I like the free agent signings they made in Tyson Jackson. His stats, he got 4 sacks last season, so not too shabby for that D-line. I think I'm going to give them a B. I think they're going to be average, Nick. It's a B+. I think a B+ is a good grade, but I think I'm going to give them a B. I think they're just giving me an average type of D-line, but they're going to be up and coming. Nick, this team, not this season, but next season, I'm going to say, this team is going to win the division, and it's going to be something different every season. This is why I love this division. It's always a different team every year. I hope that keeps on going.
And what's going to keep on going is the ever-so-changing different linebackers that will be starting for the Falcons. This year, Tim Dobbins, Prince Shembo, Paul Warlow, and Joplo Bartu. I apologize if I get any of those names wrong. Obviously, household names, right? But I'm giving that grade about a C+ for the linebackers. Throwing Corey Bierman and Jonathan Massaquoi into the mix. OCU Manura, the free agent from the Giants, is going to come in and compete for that spot. I scratched that. A B- is the grade for the linebacking core. Not great. They're an unheralded unit, but you got to believe that they're going to come to play.
Paul Warlow is probably the best linebacker right now for this team. He had 127 tackles a year ago, 2 sacks, and Nick, this is going to be a tough season for this linebacking core, but I think when you have Paul Warlow really helping you out with the load, I'm going to give him a C+. It's going to be the D-line that gets the job done at the end of the day.
The cornerbacks may do the same. Starters are Desmond Trufant, Robert Alford, and throwing a Robert McClain into the mix. And I love what the former Redskin Josh Wilson brings to the table with the Falcons. And those are 4 guys that can play. And throwing actually Javier Arenas, totally forgot about him. He'll be great in the special teams unit along with at the cornerback position. And overall, Robert, I think a B is in store for the cornerbacks.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that. I think the cornerback position is, I think it really improved. I think you also could throw in a Josh Wilson coming out of Washington, but, that wasn't a very good defense either. But, Desmond Trufant isn't going to be bad, and Robert Alford, I think, is going to help you out. Nick, I'm going to give him a B on this. I like the cornerback position. It's not too bad, and, to be honest, they really improved on the defense. So, give credit to that free agency, and Desmond Trufant, I think he's going to have an impact type of season.
The safeties may have a similar kind of impact. William Moore and Dwight Lowry are the starters. give the safety unit a B as well.
Nick, I liked William more last season. He had 86 tackles, 2 sacks, and had the most interceptions on this team. And this guy had to do a lot of the work too for that defense. So, Nick, it's hard to say, but it's hard to say that when you have to rely on a safety. It's tough. I mean, they also have Paul Warrilow that really had to make his impact. And Dwight Lowry out of free agency, man, that was a good pickup because if they didn't pick anyone else, I would have been a little worried, to be honest with you, but not too shabby for this squad at all. I think this team is looking pretty good. I think I'll give them I'll give this unit a B plus.
The big, I guess, indicator on what brings a team from I guess talent always does its part. That defense deserves a B, the offense a B plus. But what really helps a unit get over the top, there are teams that we've covered that get some really good ratings. Last team that we did were the St. Louis Rams, who actually got an A- in the defensive side of the ball. But we had them at right around 8-8 because the coach wasn't to the next level. Now, for the Falcons, Mike Smith is still as the tenured coach for Atlanta. But, listen, this guy may be in the hot seat if he can't put this team together one more time. Your grade on the coaching staff, not only with Mike Smith, but the offensive coordinator, Dirk Hoter, and defensively, Mike Nolan is your coordinator.
Mike Nolan, to be honest, I felt bad for that guy because he didn't really have anything to work with. And Mike Smith, you're in the hot seat, man. 4-12 last season, that hurts if you're a Falcons fan right now. You're hoping for a better season. You gotta at least pull out you gotta at least get a 7-9 or 8-8 record to keep your job. You might not make the playoffs, which I wouldn't be too surprised about, but you gotta at least, Nick, to be honest, this team has to be 7-9 or 8-8 for Mike Smith to be head coach again. Or he could be kicked out. Either way, Mike Smith is in the hot seat, and Mike Nolan, I felt bad for that guy, because that defense was atrocious. They didn't help out. They didn't really help the cause at all. It was mostly the offense how to do the work, and the offense doesn't win you games. Period.
This coaching staff, I'm getting real concerned. If Mike Smith starts the year 2-9 or 2-10, take a look at the waiver wire because Mike Smith might be on it. This is a extremely talented ball club that I think is one good head coach away from really turning this club around. When you take a look at some of the names, Atlanta always puts 3, 4, 5 guys in the Pro Bowl, or at least guys that deserve to be in the Pro Bowl. That's about the same of what Seattle does and what teams like Carolina do with some of the best in the league. I don't think there was any reason to lose that many games, no matter how many guys are hurt. There's still, Green Bay in the Super Bowl run that they had in 2010, but something like 20 guys on IR throughout the year. That's unfathomable, and they still won the Super Bowl. No excuse to go 4-12, none. When you were about ready to go to the championship game, it's all on the coach. I give it a C+, but that's extremely generous, I believe. You can't go that bad. But just a real quick thought here, Robert. This is something that we do on the Facebook page. Your quick prediction on who you think is the under-the-radar performance who we should see bounce out of nowhere to become a great Falcon player this season.
Ooh, this is a good one. I think, Nick, I think you're going to not pick similar as me. Talked about this guy on the show for a while, Devontae Freeman. Watch out. I think he was the under-radar draft pick. I think he's going to be an under-radar type of the player. I hope that's the case. It's either a win for me or a bust. So Devontae Freeman, make me proud. Make me your under-the-radar type of player in this 2014 campaign.
I mean, the Falcons may not be all that good, but that defense should be relatively solid, led by Tyson Jackson, the former Kansas City Chief player. Not many people have really kept track of that defensive addition, but I think he'll be real solid there for the... I don't know if that exactly counts as an under the radar, but I think it does. I mean, when you take a look at the defensive line, for the Falcons, he obviously does not come to mind. Croy Bierman, I think, is more of a household name. But listen, these Falcons should be relatively good. And I mean, Atlanta is up and coming, a few years away from a good playoff team.
Nick, I was kind of thinking the same thing as you. If it was defense or under the radar type of player, I would have picked Tyson Jackson, to be honest with you. So we were kind of thinking the same here. But I went with the offensive side.
You can throw him in as the potential best free agent, but we're going to go ahead and cue the music because we are going to, I think the best part of the show every single time. It's the NFL Prime Time Extended Edition, as we're going to bring you an entire schedule recap. We predict every single game of the Falcons' schedule and tell you exactly what they're going to end up becoming as the 2014 season comes to a close. When it's all said and done, what's the record for the Falcons, and are they a playoff team? We're going to cue this music as we start with week number 1. It is the Falcons taking on the Saints. It is at home for Atlanta, but still, I think the Saints embody too much talent for that to be a loss. So I think Falcons lose this one.
I think this is the big W for me. They're at home versus New Orleans. I think this defense is really going to show what they have, and they get the W.
Week 2, Atlanta travels to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals, and I think this is too important of a matchup and too much talent for Atlanta to not come through with the victory. Cincinnati, they went 8-0 last year in the regular season at home, but they start 0-1 in Paul Brown Stadium.
I think Cincinnati's actually going to get the win because I think the Falcons aren't. I think they're going to go on the road, and I think they're going to struggle for the first time they're on the road, so I think it's going to be a 1-1 for me.
In week 3, both Robert and I agreed that the Falcons would beat the Buccaneers on our other team breakdown. Then in week number 4, I thought they would win against the Vikings as well. Meanwhile, Robert thought that they would lose in the Metrodome. Then week number 5, it is the Falcons at the Giants, and both of us thought that New York would come out on top. So after 5 weeks, I think that they start 3-2. Meanwhile, Robert thinks the Falcons start 2-3. So that brings us to week number 6, home against the Bears. And Robert, I think that they come back and they can't get it done. It's a loss for me.
I think after 2 losses in my book, they get the win. They go 3-3.
Week 7 at the Baltimore Ravens, a struggling franchise. I don't know if they did enough from free agency, and the draft was questionable for me. C.J. Mosley, I don't know if he pans out, and he can't stop that Falcons offensive attack, as I think Atlanta matches up very well. I'd give them the win after 2 losses back-to-back.
I think I'm leading the win too. Baltimore Ravens, I don't think this team is... I think this team might be ready to go to the playoffs, but I think Atlanta is looking a lot better this year, so give them the win.
Week number 8, right before the bye, they take on a disgruntled Lions team in Atlanta, and I think that the Falcons, they are at home. They have a big playoff push available for them. They come through with a big win.
I think I'm in the loss here. I think Detroit, I think Matthew Stafford's going to get the job done with Calvin Johnson. I don't think their defense is ready. Detroit Lions.
They have a bye in week number 9. Then in week 10, they travel to Tampa Bay to take on the Buccaneers. I think they lose that matchup, and the Buccaneers, in your opinion, Robert, they lose to the Falcons, so Atlanta gets the win. Then in week number 11, they travel again. It's another road trip to an NFC South foe. This time the Panthers, and I think Carolina's too much to match. I give the Falcons a loss.
I think Carolina has a way better defense, and defense wins championships for us. Carolina gets the win. Sorry, Falcons, you get the loss.
The Falcons in week 12 are home against the Browns. Both of us think they would win, and the other team breakdown. And in week 13, I think they beat the Cardinals, but Robert thinks that the Cardinals upset those Atlanta Falcons in their own house. Then in Week 14, I think Atlanta beats the Packers. Meanwhile, Robert thinks that they lose again, that time to Green Bay. It's Week 15 now, home against the Steelers, and the upset of the season. I think the Falcons lose a big-time home matchup to Pittsburgh.
I think I give them a win. I think they match up pretty well against Pittsburgh. Match up well, but I think the Falcons get the win.
It's tough to see the Falcons, in my book, close the season with disappointment, but I think that the Atlanta loses back-to-back games, this time in New Orleans in Week 16. Robert, do you agree?
Okay, Week 16 they do get the loss. New Orleans is way too hard to handle. And the New Orleans Saints are pushing for that playoff spot over Carolina right now, but they're going to get the win in Week 17. Carolina is upsetted, and
yeah, listen, I mean, Carolina is good, but at Week 17 they may limp into the postseason. I still think that the Falcons have no match against the Carolina Panthers, which means that they lose their final 3 games to be pushed out of the postseason in my book. And for Robert's opinion, they finished the season with 8 wins. They finished 8-8, which is a far cry away from their 4-12 campaign from last year. We're going to go ahead and end the music. It's not that epic anymore. But after this season, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at my wins. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for me as well. How typical. Both of us think that the Falcons finish 8-8, which is right around where they should be. Their coach isn't all-pro. Their defense isn't something to be scared of. But when you take a look at the offense, led by Matt Ryan, I think they come back with a vengeance, have a solid season, maybe expect 30-plus touchdowns out of Ryan, and that running game is improved.
Well, Nick, a lot of defenses aren't going to be covering 3 wide receivers. They don't have enough corners to do it. So Matt Ryan has a really good advantage over some teams. And, a lot of teams are going to cover Julio Jones. They're going to cover Harry Douglas, but you got Roddy White out there. Hey, this team is looking pretty damn good, to be honest with you. I mean, maybe you don't have Tony Gonzalez anymore, but still you have 3 nice wide receiver targets to throw to. The only reason why they go 8-8, I think this team is just a lot better. They did better in free agency, and in the draft, they got 2 big picks in the first and second round. And I just really like this team, to be honest with you. I think the Falcons aren't a bad team at all. I think they're a team that's just going to keep on improving.
When you take a look at the schedule, the top end of it between weeks 1 and 3 are pretty brutal against the Saints, at the Bengals, and home against the good Bucs team, and then also taken to the road to take on Minnesota. But then the middle portion of the year is relatively easy. Then right at week 11, it's at the Panthers, and that's when things get awfully hard. They take on the Cardinals, Packers, and Steelers in successive weeks before they travel again to New Orleans and then come home to face the Panthers with potentially all the chips on the table in that matchup. It's week 17. Carolina may be right around 8-8 or 9-7 as well. Spoiler alert there. But this is a team in Atlanta that actually is pretty comparable to when you take a look at what the Rams are doing, the Vikings, maybe not the Vikings, but teams that are on the bubble of a potential wild card spot. Throw Atlanta in the mix. They're good, not great right now, but their quarterback can win and can pull them out of a lot of holes that running game may put them into.
Not week 15 through 17, Nick. I gave them 2-1. I think this team is going to come together towards the end. Yes, they'll go 8-8. I mean, they potentially make a wild card spot. You never know. I think this team could maybe, I don't know, but I don't think this team is just ready yet. But I can't wait for the Panthers and the Saints. I can't wait to cover them, because those will be 2 interesting teams to watch out for. But my final thoughts about this team: I think they have a great passing offense. The running side of the ball, I think it's got to improve. But I think a lot of people are going to be surprised. I think they're actually going to be pretty decent. And then the defensive side, that D-line is a lot more scary with a Justin Babbitt and why am I freaking I'm freaking like buzzing out here. Justin Babnell and a Tyson Jackson. That's what I'm trying to say. But I think Nick, at the end of the day, the D-line looks a lot better. The linebacking core still needs forward. Cornerback position is an average type of cornerback position. The safeties are looking pretty strong for that squad. And I can't wait to watch them because this is going to be I think their offense is going to be really entertaining to watch.
That's Robert Dieters, commissioner of the national sports radio station. Make sure to tune us in again sometime, probably Sunday night or maybe even Monday, for the NFL team breakdowns for the Baltimore Ravens. Thank you all for joining us here one more time on Spreaker.com. Again, it's a pleasure to be a part of such an amazing broadcast team that has posted more shows than any ESPN channel has ever done. I mean, this is a crew that's always on the air. Make sure to tune in all of our 30-plus members here, as national sports is becoming such a huge part of sports commentating. Nevertheless, that's Robert Dieters. I'm your host, Nick Rice. Make sure to tune in to the Baltimore Ravens coming up in the next few days for the NFL team breakdowns. In the meantime, alongside Robert Dieters and the entire national sports broadcast team, this is Nick Rice signing off here on a Friday night. Make sure to don't drink and drive, or don't drink at all. Have a great Friday night and a good weekend.